This is a wild, crazy election, and you don't have to pretend like it isn't. I know the media is trying to tell you this is totally normal, but deep down in your soul, you know it's not. And I'm about to show you all the bizarre things going on, but before I do, they're trying to say election fraud isn't possible, it's not possible to rig an election. But let's be honest, it happens all over the world, and that's like saying it's not possible to rob a cash register. Anybody that's going to tell you that is highly suspicious of actually trying to do it. Duh. So let's look at every reason this election is totally bizarre. This from Politico. A burst pipe delays Atlanta absentee vote counting. So they used the pipe bursting as an excuse to delay their counting. It says the water leak at State Farm Arena on Tuesday delayed absentee vote count by 4 hours, but did not damage any ballots, the paper reported. So it didn't damage any ballots, but it gave them a reason to delay. Interesting. Georgia's Secretary of State says some counties have forgotten to click the upload button, so they've sent a reminder out. Biggest election of our lifetime, just forgot to hit the upload button. That makes sense. Perhaps the least sneaky one of all. 538 reported 2 more batches of Pennsylvania vote were reported. 23,277 votes in Philadelphia, all for Biden. I'm guessing the statistical chances of this are close to 0, if not 0. All of the votes were for Biden, even in the most Democrat district, in the most Democrat city, in the most Democrat neighborhood. You're not going to find all of the votes for Biden. Maybe you'll find 90-10, maybe you'll find 85-15, maybe you'll even find 95-5. But 100% to 0% for Joe Biden, they're not even trying to be sneaky. They don't have to, because they know Facebook, Google, YouTube, Twitter will censor anybody who questions them, as they've set up the path to do stuff like this all year, and I'll tell you how in a second. But first, doesn't anybody feel like it's kind of weird how long they're taking? I mean, social media told us for weeks they were going to take this long. It's going to take days, it's going to take weeks. Just stay calm, this is normal. So now that it's happening, what's their excuse for taking so long to vote? Florida's one of the biggest states in the country, and they got their votes in, but we're supposed to think that Nevada and Georgia and Pennsylvania and North Carolina and Alaska just mysteriously can't count their ballots in time, when certain states with 2 to 3 times the population they have can count their ballots on time? What's going on? Well, let's look at their excuses. Just in. Instead of delaying releasing results until tomorrow, Nevada officials will release more results later today due to the high interest of how Nevada voted. So they're claiming they didn't know there was a high interest in voting, and now that everybody wants, I guess people actually want to know the results of the election, so we'll move it up to later today. Are we really supposed to believe that they didn't know that there was a high interest in voting, and that's the reason they gave to shift the time period? This is beyond sketchy and bizarre, but social media wants you to not think it is. It obviously is. What a horrible excuse, but it might not even be the worst one. Pennsylvania County explains vote counting pause, says staff is doing administrative work before resuming Friday, and some 35,000 remaining ballots are expected to be counted on Friday. I mean, they have administrative work to do. It's the most important election. It's crunch time. You pay billions, if not trillions of dollars in taxpayer money for government to do stuff, but they're busy until Friday, right? North Carolina won't update its total vote until November 12th. That's in a week. The state is crucial for President Trump's path to victory, so we'll just resume count next week. That makes sense, right? Well, of course not, but I guess if you hate President Trump, you're just pretending like this is normal, and anybody who questions it's crazy, because you believe the mainstream media and social media and Democrats and late night hosts who told you can't possibly rig an election. Just like you can't rob a cash register, just like crime doesn't exist. I mean, if you suggest that it's happening, you're the conspiracy theorist. Who believes this stuff? I don't know. And last but not least, according to NBC News correspondent Gaddy NBC, he says Arizona election officials told him the final ballot count result in Maricopa County probably won't come tomorrow, and it could be this weekend. It's like they're just playing a game with you to figure out when they will and won't count the votes. But this especially matters in this election because something happened that never happened. This isn't a normal election. These aren't normal rules. In multiple states, they used COVID-19 as an excuse to mail every single person on the voter list roll a ballot. Usually you vote in person if you want, or you request an absentee or mail-in ballot if you want to vote by mail. Of course, they don't just send every single person on the voter roll a mail-in ballot. And maybe more importantly, 35 states, including many of the sketchy ones and still counting today, allowed voters to cite coronavirus as an excuse to vote absentee. I requested to vote in person and they still sent me a ballot. This is not normal. So there's tens of millions of ballots all over the place that people didn't request in multiple states. It doesn't take a genius to figure out how this isn't a good idea. But once again, you get censored if you even suggest it's a bad idea. Nevada's reporting a grieving family now has to deal with voter fraud. Tamara speaks emotionally about finding that someone voted using her deceased grandmother's identity. Think about the tens of thousands, if not the millions of across all states of people who are dead, people who moved, people that had no idea that they're getting a ballot because they didn't request one, just all over the place. This is ripe for fraud, but you're not allowed to say this video might get deleted just for telling you the truth. The GOP in Nevada seems to be on it. They're sending a criminal referral to Attorney General Barr of at least 3,062 instances of fraud. We'll see what happens. And he's been mostly absent recently, but Attorney General Barr explained to people how this isn't a normal election and how this is a horrible idea earlier this year.
The only time the narrative changed is after this administration came in. Elections that have been held with mail have found substantial fraud and coercion.
As far as widespread fraud, we haven't seen that since.
Well, we haven't had the kind of widespread use of mail-in ballots that's being proposed. We've had absentee ballots from people who request them from a specific address. Now what we're talking about is mailing them to everyone on the voter list when everyone knows those voter lists are inaccurate. People trying to change the rules to this methodology, which, as a matter of logic, is very open to fraud and coercion, is reckless and dangerous. And the people are playing with fire.
And once again, whether you're Democrat or Republican, you should want a fair election. They say Trump's Hitler, Trump's Kim Jong-un. If that were the case, wouldn't you want to make sure that there were no fraud like dictators in other countries do? I mean, obviously you can rig and cheat in an election. And anybody who tells you that it's not possible to rig an election and not possible to cheat in an election sounds pretty guilty to me. But that's what they're doing. And as they're doing that, the New York Times said the role of declaring the winner of a presidential election in the US falls to the news media. So they want you to believe it's not the votes, it's not the Secretary of State, it's not the people counting the votes. The role of declaring the winner is the media. They'll tell you when they win or lose, which is interesting because even Fox News sold Trump out and we're reporting he lost Arizona, that he might actually win. It's going to come down to the wire, and they called it super early. It's almost like they're trying to tell people who won, delay the election, stall the election, and then get the results that they want to happen. And no, these rules are not normal. This is not how we usually conduct an election. Remember how I told you that they sent out millions upon tens of millions of mail-in ballots to every single person on the voter roll, whether they requested it or not? On top of that, in two of the most crucial states that will probably decide this election, they determined that they're allowed to count ballots days after the election. Amy Coney Barrett sat it out, and the Supreme Court allowed longer deadlines for absentee ballots in Pennsylvania and North Carolina. North Carolina has like over a week to count these ballots. Trump was doing so well on election night, he was actually on many betting websites an 80-20 favorite, and then they were allowed to look at exactly how many votes he's up. They froze the election and said, you know what, we're going to stop counting now. We'll count later. We didn't count as much as we thought we'd count, but we'll get the counts done over the next couple days. Is that not sketchy to people? Do people not understand how, of course, that could be ripe with fraud? They don't want you to even think that because they want to do it and get away with it. So not only did they do mass mail-in ballots, not only did they extend the amount of days that you can count ballots in states like Pennsylvania, but the Pennsylvania Supreme Court also ruled that the signatures don't have to match the ballot. Even in New Jersey, if your signature doesn't match your signature, your vote doesn't count. That's how they protect fraud. That's why it's there. In Pennsylvania, they ruled even if the signature doesn't match, your vote will still count. In a lot of Republican states, you have a voter ID. You need an ID to go in a hotel. You need an ID to get on a plane. You need an ID to do almost anything in this country. But when I voted, they just asked me my name and my address. For some people, it's just your name. I'm wearing a mask to the election. They can't even see my face and they let me vote. Of course, I didn't cheat, but it's not hard to figure out how easy it would be to cheat. But Democrats want you to believe it's racist to suggest that you need an ID. So no ID, millions of ballots out there. In many states, they legalized ballot harvesting, which means you could bring somebody else's ballot to the ballot box. They can count for days. This is insane, but we all saw this coming. So they could count ballots days after the election. How is that possible? If the ballot comes in a couple days later, but it's postmarked for the day of the election or before, then they're allowed to count it. And interestingly enough, a whistleblower came out in Pennsylvania and said that his postmaster at USPS was ordering workers to illegally backdate ballots to November 3rd. And then they would count that ballot even though the ballot came in days late. These are the rules, and they're figuring out exactly what they need to do to make up the vote count. So when President Trump says he wants to count all legal ballots, he's not trying to suppress the vote. He's trying to just let it be fair. They should get all the votes in and they should freeze the election, not just drag it out for 2 weeks and then people can decide how much they're down, and then they have dozens of ways to try to make up the vote. This is nuts. And Pennsylvania is one of the most corrupt states. This is the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania, a very powerful position. In 2017 said using the title president before the word Trump really demeans the office of the presidency. So she's one of those Trump's not my president type of people. Listen, Obama was my president. George Bush was my president. Nancy Pelosi is the House leader. I don't like her, but that's just the truth. I'm not a total delusional person who doesn't accept the office. It's real. That's a fact. But they don't accept facts. These people are not to be trusted. And this is is who's overseeing it? Well, not just her. Josh Shapiro, who's the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, he said days before the election, he said if all the votes are added up in PA, Trump is going to lose. Wait, he declared Biden the winner and Trump the loser before anybody even voted in person? This is insanely bizarre. But these are the people who are counting the votes. Am I supposed to sit and pretend like they would never cheat? It's not possible to cheat. There's no way to do voter fraud when I looked at all the ways that mail-in ballots changed this year and counting rules changed this year. I mean, it's obvious, but I'm supposed to just not think it's not even possible when the people in charge are clearly biased and will do anything to achieve power. And I've watched my freedom and lifestyle slip this year because of COVID-19. They used it as justification for lockdowns, mask mandates. I mean, they changed American society forever and shut off the economy. And I watched how they did it, in many ways with dishonest data and dishonest counting. If you don't believe me, here's New York Times reporting earlier this year, the city has added more than 3,700 additional people who were presumed to have died of the coronavirus, but had never tested positive. That's correct. Thousands of people, if not more, have been added to the list of COVID deaths and they never even had a COVID test. If this is the type of counting they're doing with the election, of course I don't trust it. I don't trust their numbers, not because I'm a conspiracy theorist, because I look at the CDC data, I look at how New York's counting, I look at how they're lying, I look at deaths per capita, I look at all of it, and I realize these people will never tell the truth. They will never give you the real numbers. They will just censor, try to control the media, try to control what you can and can't say, and can and can't question them, and tell you, we'll never lie to you, just live like a prisoner in this new medical state that we have you in. Don't question it, and if you even suggest that an election could be rigged, or there's any such thing as voter fraud, you're the bad guy for even thinking that. What sane person on the planet believes this? This is a former Barack Obama speechwriter in Georgia. He said, anyone in Georgia, Team Joe needs people to go door to door helping voters fix their mail-in ballots so they can count. Sign up. How would they fix their mail-in ballots that they haven't even sent out yet a day after the election to get them to count? What's he talking about? What's he doing? I guess we're just supposed to ignore it and say that this is normal. And they're censoring the President of the United States, his family, and any Republicans, even if they say in some cases a factual statement. Jason Miller said massive legal victory just now. More to follow shortly. This post was censored. They did have a legal victory in Pennsylvania today. That's a fact. So you can't even say that. This is like out of 1984, a sci-fi movie. Look at this person's feed. Censored. The President of the United States being censored. Julian's Rowe makes a great point. He said, just so I have this straight, every tweet must be fact-checked for accuracy, but literally no ballots should be. We're going to fact check your tweets, but not your identity, aka voter ID, not ballots to make sure they're legit and nobody's counting and nobody's cheating. You can't cheat, they say. What a joke. This post was insightful on my Facebook post. He said, as a son of an immigrant, my folks usually told me how they stole elections in Africa, and it's just similar to how Dems are doing it. Mysterious votes come at night, and when we wake up, they are leading. This is sad and crazy how America is going cheating this way. On Twitter, someone said, I work with an older gentleman from Venezuela. He came into work today, the most distraught I've ever seen him. He was telling everyone this is exactly what they did, exactly when overthrowing Venezuela. It's no secret that you can rig an election. It's no secret that you can cheat. It happens all over the world, all the time, and the United States media talks about it all the time. In fact, sometimes they use it as justification to go into that country, invade, and try to take control over the leader. But people really think that you can't cheat and rig an election? Do you not realize that the people who are telling you that are probably guilty? Meanwhile, the same people telling you that it couldn't possibly happen are telling you it already did happen. The Washington Post said months ago mail-in ballots were part of a plot to deny Lincoln re-election in 1864. Obviously, it can happen. And I studied Syria and Libya, that are two countries that the United States invaded under the Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama era. And when I talk to people from Syria, it's very similar to what they're doing this year. There were protests, and they turned the protests into riots, and then they used those riots as justification. This year, you had protests turned to riots. And I watched what the media did. In many ways, they inspired them, they incited it, they basically organized it and told people to go out. Then many justified it and said it's okay to burn down buildings and loot because insurance will pay for it. But then they simultaneously said it didn't happen. It's not happening. It's a conspiracy theory, but it is happening. The destruction is actually right-wing terrorists, but actually it's mostly peaceful protests, so it's peaceful. They told people 5 different stories, and I guess people hate the President of the United States so much, they're willing to lie, cheat, steal, and do anything to achieve power. And I'm reading books like Color Communism, Common Sense by Manning Johnson. I read the Communist Manifesto. I've talked to people all over the world. This entire year, from shutting off the economy, from treating human beings like prisoners, from restricting the First Amendment and censoring social media online, to not allowing protests against the lockdown, but seemingly being okay with a violent non-protest terrorist event when it goes the other way politically, this is the wet dream of any foreign enemy or domestic enemy of America. And this is a playbook communist coup. And let's be honest, they never accepted President Trump's election. They did so much insane stuff that the media will never report that makes Watergate look like a droplet, to falsify documents to try to justify Trump being removed from office due to Russia collusion. They did 3 years of investigation. It led to nothing because it was always a lie. That's the first failed coup attempt. They tried to say Trump was mentally unfit to see if they could use a constitutional way to get him out of office. That's a second failed coup attempt. They tried to get him out with the Ukraine impeachment, where Adam Schiff went in front of Congress, told a story, then got caught lying and said that his story was actually just a parody, not a real documentation of what happened, and they still went along with the impeachment, didn't get enough votes. That's the third coup attempt. And then just a few weeks or a month later, all of a sudden the novel coronavirus gives governments around the world as justification to lock down their country, shut off the economy, and maybe most importantly, justify mass mail-in ballots like we've never seen before, mandating tens of millions of mail-in ballots sent to people in certain states, every single person on the voter roll, even though they know that voter rolls are not even close to 100% accurate. It seems exactly like another coup attempt. I know it, the Trump family knows it, and we'll see what happens. He's going to try to take them to the courts. I have no doubt that he won't back down, and he shouldn't back down, because we have no problem losing an election if it's fair. If it's not fair, if it's rigged, we demand a fair election. And this coup attempt is not just brought to you by the opposing party of Trump. It's brought to you by many people in his own party, many people around him, social media websites who've been in on it all year, mainstream media, including Fox News, who masquerades as conservative but is really just as corrupt as CNN, and when it was most important to tell the truth and be honest, they did a worse job than CNN to aid essentially what is this coup attempt as well. This is the most important election of our lifetime. This is the craziest year of our lifetime, and there's no reason to pretend like it's normal. There's no reason to pretend like it's fair. There's no reason to lie and pretend like there's no possible way to cheat in an election when everyone with a brain knows, of course, there's a way to cheat in an election. For Democrats, for Republicans, for Africa, for Asia, for Europe, anything's possible, especially with these new mail-in rules that they changed this year and used COVID as a reason for it. And then in certain states, you don't have voter ID, but you also are wearing a mask covering your face. They're forcing you to cover your face and letting you vote without an ID. But we'll see what happens. I can only do so much myself, and this is my contribution to the country that I love. I don't want a banana republic. I don't want Trump to win if he didn't win. I don't want Biden to win if he didn't win. I want a fair election, and this was not one, and I don't care if I get censored, silenced, don't care. This is the truth, and if we lose our right to say that, this country is going to spiral in a decline like we've never seen before, and myself and millions of patriots will not allow that to happen. God bless you, God bless your family, God bless America, and God bless the world. Don't buy into the fear. Don't buy into the hate. Don't buy into the negativity. Don't let this get you down. I know with a lot of these isolation rules, a lot of people have been lonely because of the COVID-19 psychotic rules. A lot of people are more suicidal and depressed, and the government doesn't care. The media doesn't seem to care. I care. I appreciate you. I have love for you and the whole country and the whole world. Stay strong. Humanity will win. Truth will win. God will win. Justice will win, and we will not back down. Please stay strong for me, and have a good day. I'll be back with more videos.